All right, we're going to talk about peace. How important is peace to you? Like, is it like kind of a nice thing that if it happens, great, or is it something more significant to you in your life? You know, when I was a young person, peace was not that important to me. I wanted excitement. Anybody remember a time in your life where that was the most important thing? I wanted things that were exciting and fun and active. And I was more than once called an instigator into trouble. Like my college friends say to me, do they know what you were like in college? No, that is a need to know only basis. But the older I get, the more I see that peace is a really great thing. It's a sweetness. And yet for most of us, the number one mental issue in our culture today is anxiety. 21% of Americans at one point in their life experience anxiety disorder. It's over 42,000 Americans, 42 million Americans, experience some level of this mental condition throughout the course of their life. That we're actually more anxious and afraid than most of us realize. And that for some of us, it's never been really a priority until we realize that the world tends to be run a little anxious and afraid. So then how do we find peace? I've been doing this started last week. I'm doing this series on finding. And last week we began with finding your inner power. And every week I want to take one of these spiritual qualities or aspects, and I really want to look at how do we find that in ourselves. Because I believe that your soul is so magnificent that there is so much within you that sometimes that we don't always find it. We don't always live it. And yet there's a promise that whatever we look for, we find. So I want you to today to begin to look for peace. Not as a condition out there that we finally get to and when the world is at peace, but a condition that we find within ourselves. Because we can't have peace out here if the majority of us are anxious in here. Like, does that make sense to you that the inner life teaches that the inner creates the outer? And if we're anxious in here, we're going to create a world of chaos and confusion because that anxiety just permeates our outer world. So we have to find a deeper level of peace to create peace in our world. And in our world today, oftentimes we want to focus on the external before we've achieved it internally. So if you tell yourself the truth, what's your inner level of peace? You ever spend a whole night worrying about something? No. Shoot, no. No? And maybe you don't worry about it. Maybe you're a fretter. Because a fretter doesn't seem to be as upsetting as a worrier, right? We know we shouldn't be a worrier, so if I'm a fretter, it's just a little less, right? Because most of us from time to time worry about things. Maybe a test. When we're younger, when I say worried about a test, you think of school. And as we get older, when you think about a test, how many of you thought of a medical test? The shift changes, right? We're not worried about getting a good grade in our algebra. We're hoping we pass the medical test and that our heart is okay or our liver is okay or whatever it is. And I want us to see if we can find peace with life. Jesus said in Matthew 11, "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. For take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." When he starts this quote, you think he's talking about rest as from the physical activities of life, from feeling overburdened or overworked. And then he shifts it to this deeper conversation about your soul. Like for some of us, our souls are heavy with worry about this or that, our grandkids, the economy, the world, politics. And we haven't found peace. We haven't known peace for a while. And what does it really take to find peace in your life? St. Francis de Sales said this: never be in a hurry. Do everything quietly with a calm spirit. Do not lose your inner peace for anything whatsoever, even if your whole world seems upset. And that's really, for me, the mark is it's easy for me to be quiet and calm and peaceful when I feel like my life is quiet and calm and peaceful. But when my world feels upside down or agitated, it's so easy for me to rise to the occasion and allow my upset to meet the world that I perceive around me. But as spiritual beings, I don't think that's helpful. If we always are rising to the upset of the world, we're not really an influence on calming the world down and bringing the world to peace. Yes, in the world today, stuff is happening. There's stuff everywhere. And if we allow that stuff to just continue to agitate us, we're not being helpful. But if we actually allow the world to call us to a deeper level of peace, then we can be a force for good. And the life of inner peace, according to Norman Vincent Peale, is being harmonious without stress. And it's the easiest type of existence. Well, maybe. How many of you, in the presence of upset, find it easy to be calm? Right? It may seem like it's the easiest way, but for most of us, that's not the way our nervous system has been dialed in. Our nervous system has been dialed in, so when the world is agitated, we tend to be agitated. And it's an absolutely different point of view is when the world is getting more and more upset for us to actually find a calm place within us. The Dalai Lama said it this way: do not let the behavior of others destroy your inner peace. Ralph Waldo Emerson said, nobody can bring you peace but yourself. Lao Tzu said this way: if you are depressed, you're living in the past. If you're anxious, you're living in the future. If you're at peace, you're living in the present moment. So how do we get there? How do we get to a deeper level of peace? How do we find inner peace with no matter what's going on in our life? And I believe that it happens when we know what to hang on to and what to let go of, right? And what we want to hang on to is God. And what we want to let go of is the details. And I want you to really pay attention to when you're noticing that you're being anxious, what are you hanging on to and what are you letting go of? Because a lot of times when we're anxious, we're really hanging on to the details and we've already let go of God. But the reverse is really what allows us to be at peace, is when the world is getting more and more agitated, we hang on to God and we let go of the details. Well, Richard, that's just being naive. You know, if so my mother-in-law and my father-in-law are wonderful people. They are. They are just absolutely wonderful people. And my mother-in-law was worried about one of her kids, and her husband said to her, I'll stay up and worry, and you can go to bed and get some sleep. She thought that sounded like a great idea, right? And so she starts heading up the stairs, and she says, wait a minute. You're not really going to worry, are you? Right? And it's this idea that we think something functional happens from worry, and it just doesn't, right? We need to know what to hang on to and what to let go of. Hang on to God and let go of the details. But Richard, the details are important to me. Are they more important than your peace? Are they more important than trusting that God is at work in your life for greater and greater good? Summer Sanders, an Olympic gold medalist, said, to be a champion, I think you have to see the big picture. I think to be a champion in your life, we have to see the big picture. And the big picture is that if we want a higher level of peace, if we want a higher level of good in our life, we have to see the big picture and not get lost in the details. And the details are, what if you turned everything over in your life to God and held on that God is the one presence and the one power, and that God absolutely wants good for you in your life? Article in Psychology Today said this: have you ever been to a memorial service and heard someone, or maybe you said it yourself, this really puts things in perspective? Usually what is meant by this statement, that instead of being caught up in the rat race or sweating all the little stuff, it's far more meaningful to focus on the most crucial priorities in your life. You may leave the service with a sense of heightened awareness before you gradually fall back into the hecticness of life. Instead of letting that higher wisdom fade away, why don't you keep your mind more often focused on peace? In life, we often are bothered by the little things that we don't realize the insignificance of them in the greater scheme of things. Most of us are annoyed by a lot of little things hour by hour, day after day, that we won't simply remember 24 hours from now. Richard Carlson, in his book, Don't Sweat the Small Stuff, said this: ask yourself the question, will this matter to me in a year from now? And our ego says, well, not if I get what I want. If I get what I want, it will not bother me because I love it when I get what I want. And getting what we want is so important that we actually prioritize it instead of our own level of peace. One of the things that I've come to realize is that people who meditate on a regular basis have a higher degree of peace than most other people. People who are regularly connecting in meditation actually know a greater level of peace than people who don't. And you know, there's been studies, there's been research about in penitentiaries teaching really hardened criminals to meditate, and the transformation that it has on their life, that it actually moves them from the upset and the worry, because two things happen when you meditate. You learn to quiet your mind, and you tap into something greater. And I believe that that is the recipe for peace, that every time we want a greater level of peace, we have to learn how to quiet our mind. Because for most of us, our mind is just always at work. It's always chattering. There's always a conversation going on. And as we learn to quiet our minds and connect with a deeper level of life, the byproduct is always peace. That over and over again, if you want a greater level of peace in your life, practice meditation on a regular daily basis. Learn to quiet your mind and access more and more God. And stuff will still happen, but your attachment to it will get much, much softer. That over and over again, you know that in life, it is ups and downs. Jesus said, in the world there's tribulation, but be of good cheer, for I've overcome the world. And that when we move from an ego-focused life to a spirit-focused life, feeling more deeply connected with God, everything in our life gets easier. So today, what's your commitment to peace? Not in the world, but your commitment to peace within yourself. And what I want you to see is how often the thing, the situation, the ups and downs in life are actually here to aid us, to support us. Because if we can find peace with the ups and downs, then the ups and downs are still going to come, but we just don't ride the wave anymore. We're not on the surface bobbing up and down with all the ups and downs in life. We live at a deeper level where the deep water is, where the water is calm and still and at peace. That over and over again, I'm going to challenge you that peace is your birthright. But your ego is doing everything in its power to keep you from it. Your ego actually wants you overly stimulated, overly afraid, overly anxious, so that we live at this vibration of up and down and craziness. And all the while, the spirit, the core of you, the essence of you, the God of you, is inviting you to go deeper. So how do we do that? Well, the first thing we can do is live in the moment. We can just bring our full attention, not to the past, not to the future, but right here, right now. Because in the moment, everything we need is provided. 2, we can prioritize the things that truly are the most important to us. And we can actually decide that even though we've lived in one direction, with one level of values, we can actually reprioritize our life so that peace becomes more and more important to us. 3, we can accept the limitations. Now, spiritual people hate this one, right? Because spiritual people have a hard time with any limitations. We want to be more, we want to have more, we want to do more. But in the physical world, there are limitations. When we can accept the limitations of life, peace is actually one of the first things that we know. 4, we can exercise more. We can take breaks more. 5, 6, we can practice meditation and prayer. And 7, we can get more sleep. Do you ever notice that when you're tired, everything gets more escalated and we get more and more upset? See, this week, you ready for your homework? This week, your homework is peace. And a peace that's not attached to the events in your life. That's not based on whether you get this thing or that thing, or this thing goes right, or if that thing goes right. This week, your work, our work, is to find peace no matter what, and to see if peace actually creates a new reality. You know, every week we say, let there be peace on earth and let it begin with them. Right? Right? That's what we sing, right? Every week. Let there be peace on earth and let it begin with them. Well, the whole premise of this idea is if we're going to have peace in the world, it actually has to start within us. That we have to be that source of peace. And peace doesn't come when everything is perfect. Peace comes when it's not. In the world, there's tribulation. But be of good cheer, for I've overcome the world. That's our spiritual work, is to find peace in the midst of whatever is going on in your life. Because the storms will still come, and there'll still be rain and wind, and things will howl, and there'll be people that want to upset you, and the economy will do this or that, and somebody will say something stupid, and your neighbor will cut down your tree when it was really your tree, right? And all that stuff happens. And as we find peace, we actually learn how to go deeper than the upset. Will you pray with me? I want you to take a deep breath today. That there is a level of peace within your soul that is deep and profound. That your ego will never touch. That your mind does not know how to access. That it happens only within your own soul. And as we quiet our mind, as we still our ego, there is a profound peace within us. Today, what do you need to let go of to be at peace? And what do you need to hold on to? Would you be willing to hold on to the Spirit of God and let go of all the details in your life to know a greater peace? That peace is possible, but it only happens from within. So in the name and through the power of the living Christ, we give thanks. And so it is. Amen. I want you to take a deep breath. And today we're focusing on peace. That wherever we are, whatever is going on in our lives, with God, there's always an opportunity for peace. And then we know that peace starts within each individual. That we can't have peace in the world until we have it within ourselves. And the world seems like it's getting more and more anxious and more afraid. And all the while, the Spirit of God beckons us, calls us to come back to ourselves, to come back to peace. So whatever is going on in your life today, whatever the need, whatever the situation might be, I'm going to invite you to come back to peace. To lay down all the things that you're worried about. Anything that is frightening you or making you anxious, just lay them down. Place them at the altar. Turn them over to God. That as we learn to let go, as we learn to trust God, as we learn to quiet our minds, there's the deepest level of peace. Today, what would you have to put at the altar? What would you be willing to let go of, to sacrifice for peace? For the deepest level of peace. And as we let go, we give it to God, as we turn it over. It often turns out far better than we could have imagined. But that our mind and our ego can be so busy trying to figure out a plan that we just live anxious and afraid all the time. But our mind is always busy. We're always thinking about this or that, trying to figure this out or that out. And just place it at the altar of your soul. Place it in God's hands. And just deeply let go. Deeply, profoundly let go. My God is right here, right now. All that I need, all that I desire, I turn over to God. And I seek a deeper level of peace. That who would I be if I was no longer afraid? Who would I be if I was no longer anxious about life? If I allowed the deepest level of peace to take charge of my life? Could I be that quiet? Could I be that still? To allow God to be in charge of everything. So in the silence now, I invite you to turn everything over to God. Placing it in the altar of your soul. And deeply and profoundly letting God be in charge of your life. So whatever agendas you have, whatever desires you have, turn them over to God. And feel the deepest level of peace beginning to work in your life. Peace. Peace. There's but one presence and one power at work in the universe and in my life, and that power is God, and that power is peace. So I surrender everything to God. I place it at the altar. And there's a human part of me that wants to pick it back up and figure it out and work out the details. And yet there's a deeper part of me that knows that peace is always available, always here, and all I have to do is let go. So today we let go. And we allow God to be completely in charge of our lives. And so it is.